from home. He's not feeling good. And so I'm like, I didn't realize the look of that there. Thanks a lot. Right before I get in and see, oh, you'll be fine. I'm like,
That's a true sister's love.
she's not as snowy white as you think she is.
Oh, man.
Jeremy, sorry I was too lazy to get out of the car and come say hi to you in Texas.
That's okay. Dude, that was the weirdest. When you walk into a place when you're not expecting to see someone, Carrie,
Look on your face is pretty priceless.
Carrie and I were in Dallas, and we went to In-N-Out as we were there, and out of the bathroom walks Laura and Ella, and I was like, what? I'm waiting. I hear the door open, and I turn to see Carrie, and I'm like, what?
Different purposes,
It was weird.
different trips.
I was like, I have to travel to Dallas just so Steven will see me, and even then he won't get out of the car. I get it. Okay, well, we'll jump into this. I want to approach tonight's class a little differently than we have some of the others. Hi, it's Craig. This is Mark. I'm going to introduce you on the camera. From those watching at home, Becky apparently is watching at home. So the first part of class will be somewhat similar to what we've done. But I mentioned this last week. Especially these last few weeks, we've talked a lot about the importance of relationships for for kids. And if faith is going to stick, there has to be some level of relationship outside of just mom and dad, or even just mom and dad and youth minister. And so a couple weeks ago, we talked about relationships in general and their importance. And then last week, specifically some ways the church can do that. What I want to spend a little bit of time talking about tonight is how youth groups can help accomplish this. The reason I don't want to spend tons of time is, one, I feel like each week we narrow our audience a little bit more, and I don't want to get to a point where everyone's like, he's now talking about like a super specific group that doesn't connect with us, because I do want this to be something that we can all benefit from. But I do think, and when I say the youth group, I mean ministry that's geared towards kids in general, whether that's for our young kids or for our teenagers. How can we, because last week we spent a lot of time talking about how we don't want to just yank our kids, uproot them from the church, plug them into a program and hope that it works, because I think it's proven that it doesn't work that way. And that's not the way that God established the church to be. However, as someone who works with teenagers, I do know there are lots of really good benefits to having an active youth group where kids get opportunities to be around one another. And so the question becomes, what do we do to strike that balance? Kids get time that they can learn in an environment that's geared toward them, and they can build good relationships with other Christians their age, but then at the same time are still feeling like they're a part of the body. And so that's what I want to talk a little bit about tonight. This section, so we've been kind of working through this book, Sticky Faith. They actually wrote a book that was specifically for people who work with youth within the church. It's called Sticky Faith, and I think it's like Youth Worker Edition. Most of the material is the same. So if you bought this book at the beginning and have been reading through it, you won't see this stuff in it. This is a special chapter, and it is geared towards someone who's working with youth. So I've just pulled out a few things that I thought are good and practical and kind of tie into that relationships conversation. And so what I want to do is just kind of look through some of the findings from that chapter, and then just talk a little bit about some ways that we as the church can find that balance that allows our kids to be kids and have fun and spend time together, but don't lose the experience of being a part of the church family as a whole. And so let's just start with some sticky findings, as we've been calling them, that they collected from some of the research that they did. And so the first one, and this isn't everything from the chapter, like I said, I just pulled some out, but the top reason most students gave for being actively involved in their youth group was their youth leader. Now, before you're like, oh, I see why he included that one. They don't paint this as a good thing, and I don't think it's a good thing. The reason I point this out is because this shows how a lot of youth programs are built. It's around a personality. And if we can just find the right personality, then it will work. And it might work if you build it around that. But is it successful? And I don't mean successful in that it draws in numbers and that we maintain good involvement, but is it successful in helping kids maintain their faith? And so I mentioned this because, look, I obviously would hope our teenagers enjoy being around me and Carrie, and I hope it's really hard to build good relationships where you can mentor and help kids if they don't like you. However, I would hope this isn't the driving force behind why any kid wants to be involved with youth group. I want kids to be here not because they love me, but because they love Jesus and they love being around other teenagers. And it's interesting, a lot of the research that I looked at, obviously it's taken from a very broad approach. A lot of this I read and I went, you know what, I just don't see that at North Mac. And there may be a lot of churches that feel the same. For example, one of the things they pointed out was kids in general don't feel like they build meaningful relationships through youth group. And I'll just tell you, like, I know we have some kids who don't feel they do, but I've seen enough of our kids to come through the youth group to say, yeah, our kids absolutely build meaningful relationships. Sometimes you go off to college and relationships change and shifts occur, but I got a text a couple weeks ago from one of our former youth kids, and it was a picture of like 8 of them out to dinner, and it was just like, hey, just wanted you to know, like, we still spend time together. And that's encouraging to me because that's what I think is important. If they graduate and they don't text me, I'll survive. They send new ones in all the time, so it's okay. No, I love the kids. Obviously, it's meaningful for me and Carrie to build those relationships. But I'm not looking to build a bunch of Jeremy followers. And I can't remember who said it, but I've heard someone talk before about youth ministry and say, when you're doing youth ministry correctly, yes, losing your youth minister is going to hurt and cause some transition, but it shouldn't kill your youth group. It shouldn't destroy the ministry. And so I strongly believe that our focus should be pointing kids toward Jesus and not following some personality. That lets the pressure off me. Be like, oh, okay, it's not all about me. But also, like, that's what the church should be for. And why this is dangerous is for a couple reasons. Number one, you get kids who put their faith in a minister instead of in God, and then they graduate high school and they go off to college, and that minister's not around anymore. And aside from being able to maybe text or call and keep in touch, that anchor to my faith is gone. And so why do I care anymore? Or, and this is super unfortunate, but sadly I've seen it quite a bit, you have kids who put all of their confidence and faith into this person, and then things come out and they find out that this person is not who we thought they were, and their faith crumbles. And again, I can control my own actions and say, like, I know that can't happen here, but I don't want to create a church atmosphere in which I encourage our kids to build their faith on a minister at all, or even my kids on parents. I want them to follow my example, but I want them to follow my example because I'm following Jesus' example. And so I share this for some of those reasons, but I also share it because I would hope part of the reason our teenagers enjoy being a part of youth group is for the relationships. Both those relationships within the youth group and also relationships with the adults that they get to build through that ministry. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But this was not a, hey, look, see, they care most about me. Like I said, our youth group may feel a little different. Number 2, so these were the other, within the top 5 things kids listed that have them come back to youth group. These were the other 4. I learned about God there. I feel comfortable there. I can really worship God there, and I've always gone. And so it's a pretty even split between just like complacency, like, well, that's all I know, so I keep going. But also, it should be encouraging for us to know that our teenagers also want to be a part of it because like they do see the benefits of growing their relationship with God and learning about God. I did find it kind of interesting that in the research they did, none of the top 5 mentioned anything about building relationships with other kids. And again, that's not what I've experienced at North MacArthur, but I think there are a lot of church experiences where we assume because kids are spending a lot of time together that they're building relationships, and really all they're doing is they're coming in and they're playing games and then they're going back into their daily life. And so I just wanted to share some of those because some of them are encouraging and some of them show that like kids are kids, and if they started in a youth group when they were in 6th grade, that's what they're comfortable with. They're just going to kind of keep doing what makes them comfortable. However, what do they say? Looking back, you always, I feel like, have a better view of what you really gain from something. When you're in the moment, sometimes hard to gauge that. This was another finding. So a year out, they polled these students and asked them, what do you most remember from your time? Like now that you're a year removed, what sticks with you? The adults involved was number 1, which again, like that's surprising to me. Not just the minister, but the adults that were involved in that ministry, the community they formed, and the friendships. So, I don't know. I think it's really interesting that kids that are in it don't mention the relationships. They mention all these good things that they're getting out of it. But then a year out, it's like, yeah, the relationships. I think part of that is because a lot of kids are so used to those relationships that they sometimes don't even recognize like how beneficial it is, how helpful it is to have people that they're spending time with. And then you get a year out and you're like, oh, that was special. Like that really meant something. And now here I am and I'm trying to find a church and I can't find it and I'm having a hard time connecting with people, and that's what we remember. Man, I remember the relationships. And so, again, there's things to learn from both. But I think it is valuable for us to kind of look at that and understand that the relationship part of youth group is helpful. But not just building relationships so kids can have fun together. This was another one of their findings that I thought was interesting. It said students are looking for deep conversation and a safe, that's my ringtone too. So students are looking for deep conversation and a safe place where they can ask questions and share doubts. So they asked all these kids, like, what are you looking for in a youth group experience? And look, I spend time with teenagers. I could have guessed what I thought would have been on lots of fun activities, lots of lock-ins, which right here, Tyler came up to me last week and he said, hey, I've done lock-ins before, so if you need somebody. So 10 years I've been doing this. I finally got one. I think that means I'm supposed to retire. Tyler, you're the new youth minister. I'm sorry. Just kidding.
That's a lot of pressure.
I know. Every youth minister, it's because at one point he told somebody, yeah, I can probably help with a lock-in. And then they got you. I think we have this tendency to think that kids are just looking for the fun. We just want to have fun. And they do. Like, don't get me wrong. Look at those kids. They want to have a good time. That's Penny. She loves to have a good time. Kids do want to have fun, but that's because when you're having fun and having good experiences, that's when you build relationships. That's when those relationships are strengthened. But I think it's good for us to know that kids are looking for something more too. They're not looking for just drop your kids off and have a party and then you come back and pick them up. They are looking for deep conversations. They are looking to have a place where they can talk about things. And I know some of you may be sitting there thinking, well, not my kid. And my kid's not interested in that. And I'll just tell you, when we started doing our mini packs almost a year ago, we had boys in that group that I knew they're not going to like this. They're not going to want to share. And immediately, they opened up and started sharing things that I was like, I had no idea. I had no idea that was something that was on your mind. And it immediately showed me that these are kids, they do want to share. And they just want a safe place where they can be open and honest. This should take place at home. Absolutely. I would hope we're building an atmosphere at home where our kids can ask these questions. When they have questions about spiritual things, they can ask about it. Carrie texted me Sunday night when I was at the area wide, and she said, "You need to get home. The girls are asking me about fallen angels." I was like, oh my goodness. All right. First of all, I need to do some reading, but also they're 8 and 6. Tell them to just cool it. But I'm glad that my kids, when they have questions about things, they're like, Mom and Dad, I'm going to ask them. And I want them to feel that way. But I also know sometimes it's not, I don't care what Mom and Dad think. Sometimes you're interested in just hearing, are there other voices that are saying the same? Or is it just Mom and Dad? And we've talked already about the fact that sometimes I'll talk to a parent who's like, I've been telling him this over and over and over again, and he just doesn't seem to care. And then I'll talk to him about it, and I'll say the same thing, and he's like, yeah. I'm like, sorry, that's not me. I'm not Dad. And look, it stinks that teenagers are that way, but it's not all rebellion. I do think, and it's why I think a youth minister's role is just to support what's going on at home. It's good for a kid to hear Mom and Dad say things and then come and sit in class and hear somebody else who they respect and go, oh, I said respect. Obviously, someone else is teaching class that week. But to hear someone say the same thing Mom and Dad said, and they go, oh, okay. This isn't just my oppressive parents who are just, trying to jam their faith down my throat. This is legitimate. And sitting and talking with other kids their age and sharing those things helps them realize that, okay, it's not me versus the world. This is stuff that lots of people go through. And so, look, you can come to youth activities here at North MacArthur. We have a good time. We have a real good time. But I would be lying if I told you that that's what I care most about. I mean, I want our kids to enjoy being around one another. But if they have the best, funnest 7 years of their lives and walk away from the church, we blew it. And so I think this is what our kids are looking for. And so I think that's one way that youth groups can be a support for our kids. Again, it's all balance. The majority of this, you're hoping, is happening in the home. That's our responsibility as parents. But especially within this culture, we need all the help we can get. And so I love, look, this is not my philosophy that I adopted. The reason I took the job at North MacArthur is because the elders laid out for me exactly what they had in mind for youth and family. It was like, we don't want someone that just comes and babysits our kids. We're looking for someone who's going to support the things that are going on in the home. And so that's what we want to do. And I think that is how we build sticky faith in our kids. We give them a safe place where they can come in and build relationships and share and be open with one another. And that second part there about sharing doubts, that's important, not just within a youth group setting, but it's at home too. I know there is this tendency within the church that when people express doubts, at least for a long time, it was kind of like, well, you better have more faith. That's a lack of faith. And if our kids are going to be open enough to share things that they're struggling with and that they are questioning, we need to be patient and understanding. Even if you think, well, I never had doubts. My mom and dad told me this was true and I believed it. And okay, that's good. That's good for you. But there are, from generation to generation, there are differences. And we have a current generation of young people who ask questions about everything. Darcy asks why about everything. I'm like, hey, buddy, it's time to go to church. Why? I don't know, because that's the time we leave for church. Yeah, but why? It takes 14 minutes, and it's 15 minutes till, so couldn't we leave in a minute? We could. We could. And if you keep asking questions, we probably are. And instead of being frustrated or saying, I never had those doubts, or, well, if they're doubting that, maybe they're doubting other things. Maybe they are. But wouldn't you like to be the one that guides them through those doubts instead of them turning to some other source? I do. And so when we have kids, like next quarter, we're about to do a class where our kids just submit questions that they have. And we've done it before. And I've gotten questions where I'm like, ooh, I'm kind of nervous that there's kids wrestling with that. But then at the same time, I'm like, but I'm glad that they'll open up about it here, because that's where we need to be having those conversations. And so in my mind, again, this is not a full walkthrough of what I think youth groups should look like, but it's that balance of relationships and providing a place for conversation. And I think if we're doing that, we're probably doing it pretty well. You can always grow, but that's what we're looking to achieve. We still want to we don't want it to be a separate church. We don't want them to be doing their own thing so much that they feel like they're not a part of the work at North MacArthur. But it's important for them to have a place where they can grow and spend time with each other too. So what I want to do, I don't even have headings or little bullets under this, because what I'm hoping to do for the next little bit is just talk. I was hoping Brian Mangus was in here because he came up after class last week. I know, and he's upstairs. God bless him. When I'm down here, that means someone has to be upstairs. And Brian Mangus and Dalen Rowell, there are knights in shining armor tonight. Guys, I love kids, okay? If everyone's going to walk away from this, is Jeremy, he says, like, youth group's not as important. I think he's wanting to get fired. No, I love my job. I love your kids. But Wednesday nights, it's just a different beast. So what I'm hoping to do is just share some things. And I'm going to start by sharing something Brian pointed out last week. But the question is, when it comes to making these things practical, what can we do as the church? And I'm not just talking about the church on a large, right here at North MacArthur. What can we do to help bridge those gaps to where it doesn't just feel like the youth and the adults, or even the youth and the 20s and the 30s and the college, because that's sometimes how it feels. Brian came up last week, and he said that at the congregation that they had been before, one thing he really loved that they did was once a month they had activities that were just activities. It wasn't a youth activity. It wasn't a class activity. He said we would have game nights, and it's just game night. And people would come. And he said you'd have people from their 80s show up wanting to play bridge, and you'd have kids show up wanting to play Mario Kart, and we all played games together. But one thing he said that I appreciated was it required intentionality. We had to think about it. And this is going to sound like I'm just trying to free myself and the staff of any expectations or responsibilities. What I don't want this discussion to be is, here's a bunch of things you guys could do. Look, we will. That's part of our job is to help facilitate and things. But like we're the church. I think it's good for us, even on small scale, to say, hey, once a month on a Sunday for lunch, I'm going to invite an older couple to go with my kids to lunch. And that's just a good chance. Like it doesn't have to be a formal, planned by Jeremy event at church. But what are some other ways that we as the church can just kind of help bring those groups together and spend more time together? Or what are some things you have experienced at North MacArthur that you're like, yeah, we did this and I found that to be super helpful?
I think we have to be more intentional about getting back to involving them in worship. Prior to COVID, they had the opportunity, the boys anyway, to pass the communion tray. my girls don't see us passing the communion trays, and that's something that bothers me, is that they don't see us as a congregation participating together. They see us, mom, dad's taking a drink,
Sure.
bite of bread. But they don't see the communal aspect of it, where everybody is together taking communion, or giving them opportunities to just serve and do. We used to do like Wednesday night singing, where the boys had the opportunity to get up there and lead singing.
Yep.
But even that, like, the girls right now, some have the opportunity to do like shadowing in class, and I think that's a great thing for
Yep.
girls. I think for that younger generation, we've really got to focus back on getting them involved and finding what their interests are, because right now we're taking away their areas of service.
Agreed. And obviously, like, just so you know, like, these are conversations we've had.
Yeah.
The COVID thing is a big thing because I'm so torn because I think back to our boys passing trays. I'm like, that was a great way for people to serve. And then I also think, I'm like, why was I never bothered that everybody else in this room touched this same piece of bread I'm about to put in my mouth? And I'm not even talking about like a disease. It's just weird. That's sure. And that's part of the reason why Jimmy Hunter's done a really good job of having our boys bring the communion packets down. Because I knew, no, there are still some people who are like, it's not even about COVID, it's just about, but your point is exactly right. And Stephen, something you said helped me remember something that I have been thinking a lot about. I do think there's value in set times, our mighty men, when they get up and they get to lead in worship. And when we did those Wednesday nights where they could come up and lead. But I also feel like part of what's going to make this work is not just making it feel like, well, we get to do that at special times. We have boys, look, I'll tell you right now, we have maybe one boy in our youth group who would lead a song. Well, no. Lots of our young boys, they'll lead a song, absolutely. High school boys, I'd be like, hey, would one of you like to lead a song? And they'll be like, actually, just please put me in my casket right now. No. But I would hope that if we had a young guy who's like, yeah, I want to read scripture. I don't want them to just feel like I get to do those things. Hello? He's counting, sorry. I just want to draw attention to you. It's one of our young men who is serving. Good job. I'm only calling you a young man for one more year, so enjoy it. You're welcome, son. That was weird. Sorry. He calls me son, dad all the time, so it wasn't weird for me, but it was probably weird for everyone watching. I don't want it to just be those special times. Now, those special times are great, but Stephen, what you said about just getting opportunities in normal every Sunday worship, that's important, because I don't want us to paint this picture that, well, we get to serve when it's our special days to serve. You know what I mean? You're part of the church all the time. It used to drive me nuts when I was in youth group, and now that I'm a youth minister, I hate the saying even more when people are like, oh, those boys, that's the future of the church. And I'm like, well, it's not. They're the church right now. When one of our boys who's a baptized believer gets up and reads scripture, he's not the church of the future only, he is the church. And he should be treated like he is. And so I appreciate guys like Stephen and those who have put a lot of work into giving our boys those opportunities, and Sheila and all the ladies who are working really hard to get our girls opportunities as well. But those are things, we can always be doing better. I know, I'm coming back to you and just saying, I know Jimmy and the other guys who do the Men to Serve stuff always tell me, hey, if there's one of our teen boys, please tell me, because I want to get them in the rotation. The problem is then I talk to the teen boys and they're like, what? And part of that is just teen boys, like I'm too cool. But also part of it is we haven't done it as much. And so, man, there was a time where Tucker Wilson, he'd pop up there and do whatever. If you wanted him to do a dance, he probably would have. And I'm like, dude, he'd get up and lead. And so for a while, it was very normal. And I think because it's not seen as much, some of our boys just don't feel comfortable doing it. But yeah, agreed. Worship. Ashley.
Yes, this is more of course the mentor program. I was just thinking that, getting the kids to write down the things that they're interested do it, that they would like to do with other people, or maybe things they don't have the opportunity to do that they would like to do, maybe their family members aren't involved in those activities. And then, have, even if it's, older teens, or, adults, older adults, whatever, that can, kind of, if they're interested in that, focus on that, and be like, hey, this is a kid that, would like to go hunting somehow, I'd like, why don't I take him, or this kid likes, basketball, maybe we can go to a basketball game together. Or if it's somebody, like Audrey's really good at woodworking, maybe she'd be interested in having, showing the kids how to make something, or if it was, cooking, then maybe one of the older ladies would like to show a group of girls how to make a special recipe and then share it with them, just something like that they may not have the opportunity to do in their own home.
Yeah.
Or if they want just another opportunity, to get to know other people, older than them, through different activities.
Yeah. So Ashley actually told me this a couple weeks ago, because we were talking about the need for mentors. And so, I've already stolen your idea, and I'm working on how we can collect information from our kids and some adults, because you want to be able to be like, hey, this is a good pairing. And I mean, here's two guys right here who are a great example of using basketball as an opportunity to mentor. I think mentoring scares some people because they think mentoring means, now I'm going to come sit in a room with you and we're going to have a mentoring session and I say all the things a mentor says. Like, I have found that when I feel like I am most being a mentor is when I'm just doing something that child enjoys with them. And then naturally, they feel that bond with you, they trust you, opportunities. And so, yeah, look, I know I'm a dad of two girls. There are going to be lots of things my girls are interested in doing that I'm not going to be super interested in doing. And look, sometimes I just man up and I put on the Disney Princess crown or whatever and play the game. That's fine. But I also know that, like, if there are ladies in our congregation that enjoy doing the things that my girls want to be a part of, well, that's a great opportunity to connect them. And so if you are one of the ladies that comes and does our sewing ministry and you know of a young girl that's interested in that, maybe in the summer you say, hey, you should come over one Thursday and just sit down and work with us. That's a great opportunity. But I got to find out what because look, everyone is going to come out of the woodwork. I love to go bowling. I'm like, well, that's great. I don't need you mentoring anyone. I'm just kidding. Craig, you're great. But I think that's great. And that can happen on a super organized level of the youth minister putting things together. And it can also happen on a very personal, I'm doing this on my own. Oh, I mean, you ask me what certain boys or girls in our youth group enjoy doing. Most of them I could tell you. Clayton, he enjoys golfing, right? You looking to mentor, ask somebody like Clayton, say, hey, you want to go play 18 holes with me? A kid would love it. Play basketball on Wednesday nights with some of our young guys. That's an opportunity to connect. And it doesn't always have to be something super formal, but I know of guys like Trey Evans who are super thankful for the mentors he had, and that all started because he liked to play basketball, and so did Mark and Craig, and that's great. So, Ashley, I think that's great.
Just one more comment.
Yeah, please.
The list, it doesn't have, I do like the idea of a mentor, but then at the same time, if you have a list, then like I said, maybe they can have one person that may or may not be focused on them, but then, like I said, an older team, like, hey, let me go just look at this list and see if there's any kid that might be, that way they're having multi-age,
Sure.
multi-age, multi-people, kind of helping them through.
The only reason I said I'm still working, I always get nervous about just having a list of our kids and things they like doing because, you know what I mean. I want to protect our kids. But at the same time, when it is people that I trust, I want that available. But especially, like you said, even within the youth group. And our girls are especially good at it. They'll come up and say, hey, I want to spend time with some of our younger 6th grade girls. Do you know what they like doing? And I'm like, I don't. They're 6th graders. Do they like doing anything? They like sleeping in class? I'm just kidding. Our 6th grade girls are great. 6th grade boys, also great. 6th graders are great. They come in, they love everything, they love everybody. They're just happy to be there. It's when they get into 7th grade and they get comfortable. That's That's when it gets scary. Sixth
I
graders.
think it can kind of be done on just a simple at home, when you're listening to your own child talk about, I've been looking at this and I'm interested in that. It'd be easy for mom and dad to just say, so-and-so at church, that's what they do. Maybe we should ask them. Maybe
Yeah.
we could just talk with them. That way it's just.
Yeah, and if you don't know,
very personal.
you can ask somebody. Say, hey, my son says he's really interested in cricket. Is there anybody in the church that enjoys cricket? And for the record, I love cricket, so just come talk to me. I've been waiting for someone else in America who enjoys watching cricket. I'd love to talk. But yeah, it can just be a natural at-home thing, and you're like, you know what? I think so-and-so in the congregation. We can do a good job as parents of pairing our kids, because we talked 2 weeks ago about helping to build that web of relationships. You're naturally going to have people within the congregation that you're like, I want that person spending time with my kids because I think that's going to encourage, rather than just like a random, oh, this guy, he likes it. Okay, fingers crossed. If you know someone and you're like, hey, that's a great person to spend time with. Dale Hartman, he'll take up any hobby, I think, if you need him to. He just likes mentoring. And so, but yeah, at home, when you hear those things, you got to be intentional. You might have to seek something out. Come ask me. Say, do you know anybody who enjoys? I say this, Ashley asked me if I knew anybody who enjoyed hunting. And I said, I killed a raccoon one time, and it was with my car going out to Craig's house. And I've never been the same. So, but we can find out together, right? I mean, that's something we can do together. Absolutely. Mentoring, very important. Any other thoughts? What else do you guys think? That's it. All right. Oh, I'm just kidding. I talked with Wayne just this morning. Was that today? It's been a long day. I said, hey, why don't you just go ahead and, I don't know when it's going to be, but Wayne helps plan the adult curriculums for Wednesday nights. I said, why don't we find a Wednesday night quarter where we can do some sort of joined class with our teens and I don't know what adults yet, but and I said, I don't know that it necessarily has to be a topic about kids hanging out with adults. It can just be a class. But like those are good experiences for our kids, just to be around other adults in an environment where they're learning and growing. Again, I think I'm drawn to ideas that are like structured ministry because that's what I do each day. But there are small intentional things that we can do. I mentioned the idea of just going to lunch with somebody. As you go to BK and you're meeting families, you're going to meet people and you're like, man, this is it. That like I got to spend some time talking with Jeff Weaver. Jeff and Carrie are new here. I'm like, those are people that I love my kids to spend time with. They're just really nice people. And then you just got to find ways to do it. And it may feel weird talking to someone and saying, hey, I want my kid to spend time with you, because they're like, oh, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to get free babysitting. And the answer to that is, yes, I am. But I'm not saying I'm pawning my kids. Like, I'll be there. But that's good for our kids. I love when Craig and Tandy are like, hey, do you guys have lunch plans on a Sunday? Because then my kids just get to spend time with Craig and Tandy. And not just kids, with adults. And that's good for them too. And but all of that, it requires some work and being intentional with it.
Jerry, I can tell you that I grew up in a smaller congregation, so it was probably more easier. I mean, we had something to do all the time.
Sure.
Of course, half the church where I went was family anyway. But
Same.
We even when I was in college, mom and dad didn't get together every Sunday night with some people their age. So I got used to. When I go down home to mom and dad's, they're always playing dominoes and stuff with people that they go worship with, but I've known them forever, so it's it takes some getting used to knowing some people if you're not used to being around them.
Mm-hmm.
But, when I go down there, I look forward to hanging out with they're 80 something you know, late seventies, early eighties, we're playing dominoes and having a grand old time, so, I don't know. I know we have our BK groups and stuff
Sure.
like that, but, you know, maybe cause I have to work on some Sunday evenings, I don't always see it, so I don't know how many are actually getting together with
Sure.
other people, but that's, you know, I don't know what the young folk think of it, but I know looking back on it, that's some of the best memories I've had, is just hanging out with them, with
Yeah.
mom and dad, and them playing cards, dominoes.
And here's something I'm finding, and I've read about it in this book as well. Sometimes it's going to feel like your kids aren't enjoying it. But it's not always just about is my kid enjoying it. It's, are they benefiting from it? There are times where I can remember going over to Tom Sperling's house. This guy was so old. I mean, I was a kid. He was probably like 60, and I thought he was like 100. And we would go over there and we would sit in his living room and talk to him. And I can just be honest. At the time, as a kid, I dreaded it. But also, I learned to love Tom Sperling and grow really close with him. And he became someone that I really respected and loved. And so, yeah, there are times where your kids may seem like, I don't want to do this, and they complain about it. You don't do it because your kids are like, oh, yay, I can't wait to spend time with old people. You do it because it's good for them. And then as they get older and they leave the house and they go off to find their own, church family, even though they may not have enjoyed that, now they've been trained to have conversations with people that are older, and it doesn't feel as weird, and they can do it. And then that's when you look back and you're like, okay, I'm glad my parents used to make me go sit in Tom Sperling's living room with the plastic cover on his couch and just talk. It was good for us. So your kids, whether they like it or not, it's good for them, right? But I like those ideas. I'm like Bob. I grew up in a small church, and so sometimes it felt easier because you couldn't be divided because there weren't that many of you.
Well, one thing is, us as parents, some people have weird out ideas when what I'm fixing to say, but I was drugged as a kid. I was drugged to church, I was drugged to funerals, I was drugged to nursing homes, to hospital rooms, and I think that, Laura, she used to say, he's gonna get sick. If he gets sick, he gets sick. We're gonna go visit somebody in the hospital. They need to learn at a young age, or at this age here, that being there for people and not just doing yard cleanup and this and that.
Sure.
They need to know what real life is about and being there for folks too. So.
Yep. All right, guys. Appreciate it. We got a couple more weeks left in this. I think 2 more weeks, 3 more weeks, 2 more weeks. Come back next. I know we got 1 more week at least, so I'll see you next week.